my name is Nadja Kunz and I'm an Assistant Professor and Canada Research Chair in Mine Water Management and Stewardship here at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. Today it's my pleasure to share with you some of my reflections on what I see as the opportunities for technology and big data in support of mine water stewardship, and I'm also going to summarise some of what we've heard from you around this topic through some of the strategic planning processes that we've been doing for the Brim Water theme. I really hope that you'll be able to join us for our webinar and our launch event on June 16th. Now, I would also like to acknowledge that before I begin my presentation, I'm joining you today from the traditional, ancestral and unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, including the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh and the Musqueam nations. Now, to begin my presentation, I wanted to highlight why water issues are so important for the mining sector and why we need to have better approaches to addressing this issue into the future. The statistic on the left is from some calculations that Goldcorp had done some years ago, which they presented at a conference. They found that at some of their mines, they were moving around 15 times the volume of water relative to the amount of ore that they were processing. This highlights that particularly in water abundant areas, mining companies are very much not only in the business of mining, but very much in the business of managing water. On the right-hand side, you can see some of the significant expenditures that can come with water-related infrastructure in new projects. And when we think about places, particularly such as those in Chile that are very, very water-stressed, the amount of money that needs to be spent to build infrastructure to bring water to sites can be really significant in terms of capital budgets. So water is very important for all of these reasons and more. Increasingly, there are growing expectations on mining companies. So the left-hand side is to emphasize the growing concerns that many communities and First Nations right holders have around water-related issues. In some cases, this can result in violent conflicts. And when we look at the incidence of mining community and company conflicts, very often water-related issues and environmental issues are key concerns that are in dispute. This may be because mining is in competition with other water users, such as agriculture, and maybe concerns about the long-term legacy issues that mining will pose on water systems, and perpetual water treatment or the stability of infrastructure can be some of those concerns that communities may have. The Mount Polley tailings dam failure that happened in BC some years ago, while there were many reasons for that failure event, excess water on the tailings dam was one of several triggers for that failure. And so, so the importance of being able to manage water adequately and effectively is really important to prevent such devastating failures into the future. On the right-hand side is just to emphasize that it's not only communities and governments that have growing expectations on mining companies, but also investors are starting to ask more and more for information about the water-related risks that mining companies have, and to show that it's important for mining companies to show investors that they're being responsible in the way they're managing water. So I do think we'll see this growth in expectations and more information being demanded from investor groups, as we've already started to see this trend in recent years. Now, if I think back 10, 15 years ago, how I would have described the strategy for the majority of mining companies in relation to water, it would have been what I would define as largely a water management approach. Water management was really the domain of engineers and also environmental teams to ensure that water was being adequately managed, used and controlled within the mining fence. This was about ensuring adequate supply volumes to meet production and also managing water quality within production circuits. But what's happened to more recent years is this trend towards what is being defined as a water stewardship approach. And I would say that a lot of this push is coming from those external pressures that are facing the mining sector. Now, I wanted the activities on the right there are taken directly from what the ICMM define as being important components of a water stewardship approach. And I wanted to highlight two things that I feel are really important to mention. The first is that, as you can see from the last dot point, water stewardship is not only about an externally oriented approach, but you also need to have good water management as a building block in order to have a good water stewardship strategy. So it is not to say that we should replace everything we were doing before, but we need to have good water management and more in order for mining companies to be good water stewards. The second thing is that the top 3 dot points highlight a really different skill set to what the mining sector was used to having in the past in relation to water issues. It's not only the domain of engineering and environmental science, but increasingly this trend towards a need for more transparency and accountability in reporting, proactive and inclusive engagement. This requires skills as well in public relations, community engagement, and stakeholder engagement. So the kinds of skills that we need in our water teams are much more diverse than what they may have been in the past. And the pressure on companies to adopt a catchment-based approach also highlights the need to engage not only with communities, rights holders, and investors, but also increasingly with governments as being key partners in improving this catchment-based management approach. Now, as we think to what opportunities there are for big data in pursuit of this water management paradigm and water stewardship paradigm, I thought it was helpful to turn to some other fields to talk about what's happening elsewhere outside of mining. This paper was written some years ago by Janet Herring, and she defines some key terms around what we mean by big data and also provides a number of examples of how big data are being applied to improve and progress water science and engineering. Now, when we consider big data, intuitively, we may initially think about there being large volumes of data, but there are actually other dimensions of big data that are important to recognize. One of them is veracity around the uncertainty of data. We need to recognize that it's important to have good systems for quality assurance and making sure that we can trust the information that we're accessing. The velocity of data is increasing as well. We have the opportunity for accessing information and data in real time, which allows us to improve the frequency at which we can monitor environmental systems and to make decisions on a more frequent basis. There's also increased variety in the data that's available to us as well. So these components of big data are all really important to think about when we're considering what we mean by big data. And the right-hand side just highlights some examples of where other fields have started to apply big data to improve decision-making around key areas of water science and also engineering. And as you can see, there are certainly many opportunities for similar kinds of approaches to be applied for mining and water issues as well. And I'll talk about some of those opportunities a little bit later on. And hopefully you'll also have the opportunity to learn more about it when you join our launch webinar on the 16th of June. I wanted to turn as well now to some of what we've heard from our external partners as part of our strategic planning process for BRIM. As you can see from this slide, we've been engaging very widely with partners outside of academia in order to develop and define priority areas that we'd like to progress from a research perspective. We wanted to understand what are the knowledge gaps that exist outside of academia from the perspective of our partners in industry, in government, and also in First Nations communities and rights holders. And so one of those themes that we identified through that planning was focused on big data and data science. So this is the reason that we're using data science as a springboard to launch our water theme on the 15th. And in advance of that, I wanted to highlight some of what we heard from you. So at the workshop, we had a diverse range of participants. And as I said, we will be delving a bit more deeply into this theme, and you'll be able to learn more about the research we're already doing at UBC when you join us at our launch webinar. We'll also be launching a strategy document to accompany this in the following weeks. So what we heard at the BRIM workshop on data science was many things, but I'm going to just highlight 3 areas that I felt were important. One is around data availability. It was recognized that there are ample data in relation to water and mining that we could make better use of. This was particularly the case from the perspective of a processing point of view, where often we have large amounts of data. For environmental data, it's mainly compliance data that's available, and there was a recognition that it may also be advantageous to have more data on environmental data, and that filling some of those data gaps was important. We spoke about new tools that would allow easily new tools and opportunities to fill those data gaps in terms of flexibility in analyzing data, as well as using low-cost sensing methods such as drones and satellite data in order to access new data around systems we may not know as much about as what we would like to. We also spoke about the fact that big data is not necessarily good data, and there was a real recognition that we need to continue collaborating between domain experts in the area of water and mining together with data scientists. And this is really fundamental to what we're aiming to do within our work at BRIM. We also heard loud and strong about the importance of data ownership. This was particularly raised by some of our participants from First Nations communities that we were engaging with, and also from regulators calling for accessibility of data to enable better decision making and better community input. Opportunities for critique and review were also recognised as important. So this element I spoke about earlier around the need for a proactive and inclusive engagement in terms of water stewardship will absolutely apply as we move towards this data revolution. So this final slide is really to emphasize some of the opportunities I see around how we may organize some of our work within the data science theme at BRIM. I like to think about mine water systems as being, we can think about them at different scales, from our process understanding of how water and energy are managed, our understanding mechanisms around environmental systems, through to improved decision-making at the site level and also at the regional scale. There are many different opportunities for applying data science, and I hope that through the BRIM water theme, we'll be able to advance some of these areas going forward. So thank you very much. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. And I also hope that we'll be able to see you at our launch webinar on the 16th of June. Thank you.